papers were already signed when she said it. I just hadn't told her yet. It was a Sunday in late October, the kind of day where the light comes in low and golden through the kitchen windows, and you almost forget that anything is wrong. My daughter-in-law, I'll call her what she was to me for 11 years, my son's wife, was sitting at the head of my dining room table in my house, the house I built with my own hands and my own money over 4 decades in this country. She was sitting there like she owned it, and I suppose by that point, she believed she did. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 67 years old, a retired civil engineer, and I spent my entire adult life making sure the people I loved never had to worry about anything. That's the kind of man my father raised me to be. You provide, you protect, you don't complain, you keep your word. I kept my word right up until the moment I realized no one else intended to keep theirs. My son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, whatever has happened since. He came back from his second job layoff in the spring of 2021 with that look on his face. I'd seen it before, the shoulders pulled in, the jaw tight, the way he couldn't hold eye contact for more than a second. He was 41 years old, and he looked like he was 16 again, and had just backed my truck into a mailbox. "Dad," he said, "we're in trouble." I didn't ask him how much. I should have. Instead I said, "Come inside, tell me what happened." His wife had a business, a boutique marketing agency she'd started about 3 years before, during the pandemic, when everyone was pivoting to digital. It sounded impressive. She talked about it impressively. Clients, campaigns, contracts. What she didn't tell me, and what my son had apparently only just discovered himself, was that the business was hemorrhaging money. She'd taken out a line of credit against it. 2 lines, actually, and when the client started leaving, the payments stopped, but the debt didn't. They owed close to $180,000. I sat with that number for a long time. I'm not a man who reacts immediately. I learned that in my career, when the ground doesn't behave the way your calculations said it would, you stop, you reassess, you don't panic. So I didn't panic. I told my son I would help, not because I owed him anything. He was a grown man who had made grown decisions, but because that's what fathers do. Or at least that's what I thought fathers did. I offered them the in-law suite attached to the back of my house. It had its own entrance, its own bathroom, a small kitchen. I built it years ago thinking about my own parents who ended up not needing it. I told them they could stay there while they got back on their feet. I told them I'd cover their minimum debt payments for 6 months, give them time to stabilize. I told them I expected them to make a plan and show it to me, because I wasn't a bank and I wasn't a charity, but I was their family. My daughter-in-law smiled at me across the kitchen and said, "We won't forget this." I believed her. Lord help me, I believed her. The first year was fine, mostly. My son picked up consulting work. His wife relaunched the business smaller, leaner. They paid me back a few $100s here and there, which I told them to keep, which I now understand was a mistake. Not because I needed the money, but because when you stop asking people to hold up their end of an arrangement, they stop thinking there is one. By the second year, things had shifted in ways I couldn't quite name at first. Small things. My daughter-in-law started having opinions about the main house. Not suggestions, opinions. She thought the living room furniture was dated. She mentioned, twice, that the guest bathroom could use updating. She started having her clients over for meetings in my kitchen without asking, and when I said something about it, my son looked at me like I'd been unreasonable. I let it go. That's what you do with family. You let things go. But the letting go accumulated. By the 3rd year, she was making what I can only describe as territorial moves. She began referring to the property as our place to people she introduced me to, neighbors, friends of hers, people I'd never met. Once I overheard her on the phone saying, "The house has good bones, but we'd obviously want to renovate." I stood in the hallway and listened to her describe square footage and the potential of the backyard, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't say anything. Not yet. What finally opened my eyes wasn't something she said to me. It was something I found. I have a filing cabinet in my home office, old-fashioned, heavy, the kind with an actual lock. I keep property documents in there, insurance policies, my will, things like that. One afternoon I came home early from my cardiologist appointment and found my daughter-in-law standing in my office. The filing cabinet was closed. She was holding nothing. But the chair behind my desk had been moved, and there was something about the way she turned when I walked in, too quickly, too carefully neutral, that told me she hadn't just wandered in by accident. "Looking for something?" I asked. "Oh," she said, "I was just seeing if you had a stapler." "There's a stapler on the kitchen counter. There has been for 20 years. I nodded. I told her I did have one, somewhere, and I'd look for it later. She left. I stood in my office for a moment, and then I did something I'd never done before in my own home. I checked the lock on the filing cabinet. It had been tampered with. Not broken, not obviously forced, but the little scratches around the keyhole were new. I know every inch of that cabinet. I've had it since 1987. I called my attorney the next morning, not because I had a plan yet, I didn't, but because I've learned over 67 years that when something feels wrong, you get ahead of it. You don't wait for the problem to fully materialize. You prepare. My attorney, who I've worked with for over 20 years, listened to what I told him and asked a few careful questions. One of them was, "Is the property in your name only, or is there any shared documentation?" It was in my name only. My son's name was not on the deed. His wife's name certainly wasn't. "Good," my attorney said. "Let's keep it that way." He also said something else, which I turned over in my mind for weeks afterward. He said, "Talk to your financial advisor too. Make sure your accounts are structured the way you intend them to be. Sometimes people do a lot of planning for their own futures around other people's assets without those other people knowing." I made an appointment with my financial advisor the following week. What she found took a little time to untangle, but the short version is this. My daughter-in-law had been making inquiries. Not illegal ones, nothing that could be prosecuted, but the kind of inquiries that tell you what a person is thinking about. She had consulted with an estate attorney. She had asked questions about guardianship and conservatorship and what the process looks like when an elderly parent becomes unable to manage their own affairs. I was 67. I'd had one minor cardiac event 18 months prior, caught early, treated, resolved. I walked 3 miles every morning. I drove myself everywhere. I managed my own finances, cooked my own meals, and could still read a structural engineering report without glasses. She was laying groundwork. That's the only way to describe it. The birthday dinner was my idea. I want to be clear about that. I suggested it, a nice meal out, somewhere good, my treat to celebrate my son's 44th birthday. I thought it might reset something. I thought, in the stubborn way that fathers think, that if I could just get us all around a table in a neutral space, maybe we could remember that we were family. I made a reservation at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a wine list, and a maître d' who knows your name. I wore my good jacket. I got there early and ordered sparkling water and sat with my hands folded on the table and told myself to be patient, to be generous, to be the bigger person. They were 40 minutes late. When they finally arrived, my daughter-in-law was already on her phone. She sat down without taking off her coat for the first several minutes. My son ordered a drink before he said hello to me. We got through the appetizers. The conversation was the kind of surface conversation that has stopped meaning anything. Work, weather, a neighbor's renovation, a show they were watching. I asked about the business. She said it was fine. I asked if the consulting was picking up. My son said he was exploring options. I asked gently if they'd been thinking about timeline. They'd been in the suite for almost 3 years. I wasn't asking them to leave. I want to be clear about that too. But I had started to think about what I wanted the next chapter of my own life to look like, and I thought it was fair to have a conversation. My daughter-in-law put down her fork. "Timeline for what?" she said. "For your own place," I said, just thinking out loud. "I'm not in a rush, We've been paying you back," she said. "We've been contributing." The contributions she was referring to were, at that point, sporadic and small. A few grocery runs, a tank of gas once, against the 3 years of rent-free living and the $180,000 in debt assistance. It was not exactly a ledger that balanced. I said so calmly. I said I wasn't keeping score, but that I thought we should be honest with each other about where things stood. And then my son said something I wasn't prepared for. He said, "Dad, I think you need to start being realistic about your situation." I looked at him. "Your health," he said. "The house is too big for one person. It might make more sense for everyone if we formalized things, made it an actual arrangement." Formalized, I repeated. "The property," my daughter-in-law said. "We've been thinking about it. It would make sense for it to be in all our names, for continuity, for when." "For when I die," I said. She smiled, not warmly. "We're thinking about the future," she said. "That's all." I sat with that for a moment. The restaurant moved around us. Other tables, other conversations, the quiet sound of silverware on good china. I thought about my filing cabinet. I thought about the estate attorney. I thought about the word conservatorship and what it means and who it benefits. "I appreciate you both sharing that," I said. "Let me think about it." We finished dinner. I paid the check. I hugged my son at the door and told him happy birthday, and I meant it, even then. I drove home. I sat in my car in my own driveway for a while, looking at the lights in the suite window, and I made my decision. The process took 11 weeks. I won't walk through every legal step because that's not the point of this, but I will say that my attorney and my financial advisor both knew what they were doing, and I trusted them, and they were worth every dollar of their fees. The house went on the market quietly, what they call a pocket listing, shown only to pre-qualified buyers through a broker I'd worked with before. It sold in 17 days for $847,000. Not the top of the market, but clean, fast, and final. I had already found my own place. A smaller house, 2 bedrooms, in a 55-plus community in a town about 90 miles away, close to my oldest friend from college, close to a good hospital, close to the kind of life I actually wanted. I put down a cash offer. The keys were in my pocket before anyone knew I was looking. I transferred what I needed to transfer. I restructured what needed restructuring. I made sure my estate plan reflected exactly what I intended and nothing else. I hired a moving company for a Tuesday morning when I knew my son would be at a meeting he'd mentioned, and my daughter-in-law had a standing appointment she never missed. I'd already been quietly relocating things I cared about for weeks. Photographs, my father's watch, my mother's dishes, documents, books. The moving crew was efficient and professional and done by early afternoon. I left a letter on the kitchen counter in the main house. Not long. I drafted it carefully with my attorney present, just to be sure. It said that I had sold the property, that the new owners would be taking possession within 30 days, and that I wished them both well. It said I had engaged a relocation specialist. There's actually a profession for this, people who help seniors transition their living situations, who would be in touch to help them identify suitable housing. It said I loved my son. Because I do. That part was not legal language. That part was just true. It said I would not be reachable at any address they had for me, and that if they wished to communicate, they could do so through my attorney. I drove 90 miles. I carried the last box into my new house myself, even though I probably shouldn't have. My cardiologist would not have approved. I set it down in the living room, and I stood at the window and looked at a yard that was mine, a view that was mine, a quiet that was entirely, completely mine. That was 14 months ago. My daughter-in-law sent emails for the first few weeks to my old address, which I had set to forward to my attorney. I'm told the content was not pleasant. My son left voicemails on a number I no longer use. Eventually those stopped too. I don't know where they're living now. My attorney knows, because the relocation specialist was thorough and because the legal closing required some communication, but I didn't ask and I don't want to know. What I know is this: I get up in the morning and I walk 2 miles on a trail behind my neighborhood where the deer come out near the fence line if you're quiet enough. I have coffee with my old college friend on Thursday mornings. I have a standing Wednesday dinner with my neighbor across the street, a retired schoolteacher named June whose husband passed 3 years ago and who makes the best peach cobbler I've ever eaten in my life. I have a son, He is out there somewhere. The door in my heart is not fully closed, and I'm honest enough with myself to know it never will be. But the door to my house, this house, my house, the one I chose for myself, that one has a deadbolt, and the only key is on my keychain. Some mornings I sit on my back porch with my coffee, and I think about what I should have seen sooner, what I should have said differently, at what point the story between us went from something that could have been repaired to something that couldn't. I don't always have an answer. I don't think I always will. But I know this. I am 67 years old. I worked for 40 years. I gave everything I had to the people I loved. And when I finally had to choose between what was comfortable and what was right, between staying and being quietly dismantled or leaving and being fully myself, I chose myself. I don't know what my son thinks of me now. I don't know if he understands what almost happened, what they were building toward, what I would have lost if I had kept being patient and quiet and generous the way I was raised to be. What I know is that I ate breakfast this morning on my own porch in the October light, the same golden light that always comes in low this time of year, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like myself, and I never went back. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. Not in a regretful way, more the way you review a project after it's finished, looking for the places where the load-bearing calculations were off from the beginning. The truth is, I made it easy for a long time. Not because I was foolish, I'd like to think I'm not, but because I believed that generosity, offered freely and without conditions, would be received the way it was given. That's not naivety. That's just what you learn to expect when you've spent your whole life trying to do right by people. You assume, eventually, that the world works the same way back. It doesn't always. What I've come to understand is that there's a difference between being a good person and being a wise one. I spent 40 years being good, showing up, providing, staying quiet when I should have spoken, giving more when I should have held the line. And goodness, real goodness, requires exactly that: sacrifice, patience, the willingness to absorb cost so the people you love don't have to. I don't regret any of that. But goodness without discernment isn't virtue. It's exposure. My daughter-in-law wasn't wrong that I was aging. She wasn't wrong that the house was large for one man. What she was wrong about, what she miscalculated entirely, was the assumption that because I was older, I was already diminished. That because I had given generously, I had given up, that the patience I extended was the same thing as surrender. It wasn't. I was watching, I was thinking, and when the moment came, I knew exactly what to do, and I did it, without drama and without hesitation. That's not something you learn overnight. That's something you build over a lifetime. The ability to stay calm when everything is telling you to panic, to act from clarity instead of anger, to make decisions that will hold up not just in the moment, but in the years that follow. My son is out there carrying something I can't fix for him. That's the part I sit with on the hard mornings. He made choices, and his wife made choices, and I made mine. And now we all live in the world those choices built. That's not punishment. That's just how it works. The decisions you make, whether you make them out of integrity or out of fear or out of greed, those decisions don't disappear. They become the life you're living. I want people who hear this to understand something. I didn't win because I was clever. I didn't survive this because I was lucky. I survived it because I had spent 67 years building something on the inside that no one could take from me. A sense of what was right, the mental sharpness to recognize when something was wrong, and the backbone to act on what I knew even when acting was painful. Those three things together are what got me to this porch, this coffee, this morning light. You don't build those things in a crisis. You build them every day, long before you need them. That's what I want my son to understand, if he ever finds his way back to a conversation with me. Not that I was right and he was wrong, but that the kind of man you are in the quiet moments, the choices you make when no one is pressuring you, when the stakes seem low, when it's easier to go along, that's who you'll be when it matters. I hope he finds his way to that. I genuinely do. For now, the deer of the fence again, the coffee is still warm, and I am exactly where I chose to be,